All right, man. Back. I'm back.
He's
Race
back.
is over.
He's back. He's ready. He's
I'm
pumped.
energized to.
Energized. He took his morning dose of Ironman Facebook group pages, and he is ramped and ready to go. It's September 17th. The year, it's still 2024. And welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast, and this is episode 798.
Yeah. Man, nothing fires me up like a Facebook group.
No, I was going to say nothing fires you up like a Facebook group. Speaking of fired up, I had a few people comment about the podcast last week and the one on Thursday specifically, and they said they had to go back and look and see if their listening speed was at 2 or 3 times because I was talking so fast. So I'm going to try and slow it down a little bit more of like a zone 2 recovery pace. But listen, when I get passionate about stuff, like that kind of like how we treat ourselves and our bodies and fueling and swimming and overtraining and brick runs, I tend to speed up a little bit. So I'm going to try and keep things a little smoother and controlled today. I don't want to go, glycolytic out of the gate. But yeah, it was a pretty busy weekend in Michigan 70.3, which by all accounts, never been there. Had a lot of athletes do it. Every athlete said they had a great experience there. Great course, or underrated course, great city, semi-hard to find lodging there, but pretty awesome venue. So that's always good to hear. I know they moved that race, and not everyone was pumped. They moved it to Frankfort, Michigan, but by all accounts, was a really great racing weekend. You got Ironman Maryland this weekend. Saturday Ironman, you got Ironman World Championships for the females in Nice. So you get listen, it's always a busy time of the year. So we appreciate you tuning in today. We know you have quite a lot of options in triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Time is very valuable. So we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. Mike and I also like to talk frequently about what our own athletes are going through. He and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level athletes in the very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to our championships, and anyone in between from all over the globe. We use a feedback loop we have with them and training weeks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also like to utilize our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question, but let's right in. Awesome people, fantastic community, solid resource in a sport that is oftentimes way overcomplicated and way too confusing. We offer a nice, safe, actionable space to get great information from seasoned veterans who are willing to lend a hand and answer some of your questions. We go in there once every 3 to 6 weeks, do a bit of a Q&A, take the pulse of the community. But that is it. We have no sponsors and we have no ads, but we do have an agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah, I had to check my speed there. You were going a little fast, and then you kind of
I
backed
know.
it down. I saw you mentally backing it down, even through.
I did. I checked my first opening script split, and it was a little hot. And I knew I had to back it down, or I was gonna be bonking here at like minute 45. So, but as I was ending that, and I was saying like the no sponsors and no ads thing, going back to our podcast last Thursday, where we got, honestly, overwhelmingly positive feedback from that podcast. And I think one of the things I love the most about no sponsors and no ads is freedom. Mm-hmm. And that's not a conversation that, most podcasts, one, are willing to have, and two, can have, because they've got, they don't want to offend sponsors or offend a product. And that's just not, what we're here for. We're here to drive discussion and encourage people to critically think and, and do their own research, and most importantly, come to their own conclusion. Regardless of the conclusion. And that's with all things, right? Not with the fueling discussion we had that got a lot of response, but also in the training, right? That we talk about, and the training philosophy and how you approach life and the lessons that we've learned. Like, everything we do and everything we talk about isn't for you to cut and paste. It's to allow you to, take what makes sense and apply it to your own life and try to navigate that and formulate it to yourself, not do what everyone else does or not what you hear. Cause that's also like what another coach was commenting to me. Yes, there's experts in every field, right? And none of them are willing to listen to the other. They're just all experts in their field. And I think all of them genuinely have kind of an underlying agenda with their area of expertise. But that what happens is there's so much conflicting information that it causes a lot of athletes to do absolutely nothing because you can't discern, well, what's right and what's wrong, right? Or what's the best thing for me. And so they don't even have like the time or the bandwidth to even like think through what might be the best for me. And so you see this all the time, these blanket statements about, how many carbs taken an hour, how long should your long run be, how weekly volume should be. And like, there is no specific for anybody. Everyone is unique and it's your life. So, again, like our conversations and our discussions, we don't come to you and we don't claim to be experts. We come to you with a ton of experience. But, and then that was a quote that I loved the other day that I was listening to another a sports nutritionist. And she said, I don't see the research doesn't say that, but my clinical experience shows that. Basically saying the research will tell you the opposite, but what I've seen personally in my own life with the athletes that I work with is it's actually this. And so I think we all have to take that approach to our own experience in our own life, regardless of what you might read and how you might get confused and how you might even second guess what feels right. Even if 40 people say you're wrong, if it feels right and is working for you, no matter what it is, then don't stray, right? Stay the course, find out what works best for you. And that's one of my favorite things about our podcast is that we can have these open discussions and dialogue to challenge, again, not challenge you to think and telling you that you're wrong, but challenging you to think and wondering and trying to figure out how right you really are.
Man, it took me a long time because it's so easy these days to kind of see something new and be like, yep, that's it, I'm buying. And then you go into it and then you're like, maybe that's not quite it. But you're right. I mean, we've, been in this for a long time and coached a lot of athletes and seen a lot of like with our eyes situations, and I just think it's real easy to kind of be bouncing around out there with all the information and, I fall prey to it too, but that's why I've just really been working on kind of, all right, that looks pretty good, but stepping back a little bit in the overreaction, you kind of want to just sort of really know it for yourself. And that's always been kind of my philosophy is that, I've been a big listen to your body person and really kind of step back. I like to write about stuff like that a lot and really figure it out, like what's working, and we've seen so much with people, it's just different phases of this game, like I don't want to say late phase of it, but I've been around a lot and I have different agendas. When I came in hard, sometimes you come in hot and you're all excited and that kind of carries you for a while. And then it's like, whoa, you got to kind of look back and decide if what you're doing is the right thing. I've been, I did a lot of what I call lifestyle training this time and it worked. And while my result wasn't necessarily what I would have liked, but I still think there's something there. You know what I mean? So it's like, for me, it's about longevity, about feeling good and really racing in such a way that I'm free and it makes sense. But the recovery, I mean, I was hanging around some of my old buddies this weekend and, all you got to do is just kind of look around sometimes and be like, all right, I'm sort of on the right track here. But I really want to, continue to feel good. And like I said, my mantra is always to feel younger as I get older. So to me, that's most important. And I think, we got a lot of good feedback from that last podcast. And I think it's important to just sort of discuss some of these things because there just is no real black and white. It's just everybody wants to be definitive about everything, but we all have our own needs and we all have our own processes and I think we have to be honest with ourselves about what works, you know. And sometimes things work for a little bit, but like you said about that one pro athlete, they know maybe it's not the best thing for them, but they're just going balls in. And in that particular year or whatever, but that doesn't really make sense in the long haul. So these are all things we got to balance, because there's a lot of different personalities and body types and situations and people that we coach that, you know, have different agendas.
And I mean, you articulated it so well there. And I think one of the about kind of staying focused, because I mean, I do, like, you know, as coaches and athletes, you know, and again, I succumb to the same, like, you know, attention struggles that I think a lot of people do. And even though I know, you know, what works well for me, you know, and I think that's part of the difficulty of being a coach, right? Is you're always trying to explore what can work better. And in the process and journey of trying to figure out what could be better, sometimes you stumble upon things that don't make it better, right? As part of that process, because you're continuously trying to learn, you're continuously trying to navigate and do things better. Again, not just like, you know, throwing, you know, stuff at the wall and hoping it'll stick. But I mean, again, like that, you know, you take any research paper anyone likes to quote, and all they're going to do is, you know, for the most part, find some randomized study between 8 and 20 people. That's it. You know, of the same age, right, and the same sex and the same fitness and physical condition, right? And then they're gonna generate, you know, a theory and confirm whatever it is they probably wanted to confirm, right, out of the gate. You know, I would venture to guess very few scientists, you know, come out and have a you know, a research result go the opposite of what they intended it to go, or really truly wanted it to go. They kind of always proves what they wanted to prove. And I think when you you know, when you do that, but then, you know, and you get tunnel vision, like, and athletes do that with certain training philosophies, and coaches do too, right? But when you work with, and you have worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of athletes like we have, and you have access to coaches of all ages and sexes and experience levels, I mean, it's a one giant melting pot, right? And you see different things that work. I mean, there are things that I thought that work now that I thought would never work for some people. And there are certain training methods and approaches that I thought would always work for everyone that don't work for a lot of people. And again, like that's the beauty of coaching, and coaching a wide range, again, of athletes like we do, is you figure this thing out. And plus, you know, and on the same token is, you know, you look at and you feel like and this goes on the athlete, right? Is you kind of know what's best for you, but you also get so distracted. And again, like a lot of it's social media. Like you legit know and feel what is right for you, but you get distracted and you scroll through one thing and you see someone else doing one thing and you're like, I wonder if that can make me better. Even if it flies in the face of everything that you currently do, you get distracted, right? And you come back to your, you know, you don't want to stay disciplined with knowing, you know, what you know and doing what you're supposed to do. You know, and listen, I'm the same way. Like, I know for me, there's a very specific way that if I eat that way, and I'm not even going to discuss it because, again, like, I think I'm not an expert, but I think experts, right? And there are a lot of them that either are out there or that claim to be, that they don't realize the power of suggestion that they have over people. And so I'm not even going to go into what mine is. I'll go into the results of it, but it's been one that I've found on my own that I went out to eat on Friday night. We went out at Mexican, you know, we went to Andy's, had some frozen custard to kind of celebrate the week. And, you know, right after our conversation on Thursday, right, about how terrible sugar is for your body, and like I could feel my heart like racing, and I was like, this is exactly, you know, what I was talking about the previous day. Yeah. And you know, it was all that, you know, and I woke up the next morning totally almost in the red in my HRV. Everything was just through the roof, terrible. And I said, you know what? Enough is enough. It's time to get disciplined again. And to go back, you know, for like the 19th time this year and go back to what I know works well, because this is about health and being able to feel better. Because I mean, listen, I like frozen custard like anybody. I like a good concrete with Butterfinger and Reese's just like the next person, and that's I'm not immune to those. To taking those and just absolutely going to town. So and as you should every once in a while, I think it's totally fine. Every week, probably not. And so I say, you know what? So I eat a certain way Saturday, Sunday, and then best results of the year from a sleeping standpoint, from HRV standpoint. But then again, which is again the hard case when it comes to analyzing yourself, is I also had to ask myself, well, was I back with such a high HRV and low resting heart rate? Was it really the fuel, right, that I was putting in the food I was putting in my body or not putting in my body? Or was it, one, the fact that it was the weekend, right, and I wasn't working as much, right? So lower stress could have a huge impact on it, right? I had distanced myself further from the travel and the stress that is, like, an Ironman 70.3 weekend, an Ironman weekend, like it was in Madison. Or was it just because my body had such a huge, undertaking of crap that one day of like clean eating makes a dramatic effect? So you take all those things into account. But at the end, Monday did the exact same thing, ate the same way, even after, as Mondays are our most stressful day, in my opinion, of the work week. And I woke up this morning totally anticipating to be right back on a usual Monday struggle. Nope. Still on a high. And so again, but again, the hardest thing is to stick with it and to stay disciplined, because you get totally distracted. And a lot of times what I've found is the only time you get distracted and adopt that distraction is because it feels easier, right? If you're very disciplined in whether it's fueling, eating, nutrition, training, if you're really, really, really disciplined, I've very rarely find, and it's working for you. I rarely find an athlete or person who gets distracted by something that's more complicated and harder to be disciplined with. They're like, you know what? I'm really disciplined right now. It's kind of hard because, discipline is, but I found this other thing that I think it's going to be more complicated and cause me to be even more disciplined and more specific. I'm going to try that. No, we always get distracted with what becomes easier, right? Well, it'd be a lot easier, if I could just do this, because then I wouldn't have to think, then I could just shove whatever I want to my mouth. I could do whatever training I want to. I could do the training that I want to do, not that I know that's good for me. So we always get distracted with like the easier piece. And then the further we get into that, we also try to, I think, do, the old WebMD affirmation, whereas, you feel like you're getting sick. So you get on the internet and all you do is find reasons to be sick and that affirm that you are sick, or that it's this kind of thing. And so I think, again, it's a trap that I think we all fall in every area of life, whether it's, better houses, better cars, better jobs, better spouses, better relationships, better whatever it is, very few people are going the opposite direction. And so again, I think it's never been harder to be disciplined. And I think we see that, not just discipline, but I think discipline in your own journey and quieting the noise that is social media and Ironman Facebook groups and your training partners and Strava and, advertising. It's never been harder to be disciplined in your own personal, what works for Mike or what works for Robbie way, and not try to adopt someone else's as your own because it feels easier.
Yeah. I talk a lot about trying to be in my breath, and whenever I think about, like you and the custard, or, people plowing down some stuff that they know might not be good for them, but they're craving it, I always come back to what kind of a thing. I try to come back to it where I'm like, all right, well, you're doing this, but really take your time with it, because it seems like whenever we go into that mode where, it's like a bag of popcorn or something, you just eat the whole damn thing instead of taking your time to eat it and really like embracing what it is. If it's something that's going down that may not be normally what you like to taste, but it's a craving, if you slow it down and really try to, take it all in and really smell it all. And it doesn't seem as appealing sometimes when you're doing that kind of thing. But I also think it's, I've really worked on not being too hard on myself, like when in that situation, because it is easy to be like, all right, I went out, shit, I last night, so tomorrow's going to suck or whatever, you know, but it's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, how do you get through it the next day and not beat yourself up and then just kind of move on? And I think giving it a lot of thought and presence in your mind is a challenge too. You know, so in those situations too, I talk about transitions in life a lot of times. And, you know, if you wake up and you feel like that, or I feel terrible or something isn't right or whatever, I just immediately try to go and do something low impact or something that's just going to kind of get things moving a little bit, whether it's a sup board or maybe sitting on the rower for like 5-10 minutes, just real easy, something like that to kind of spark, you know, just to move things around and get in the mood. And then you can kind of address a day rather than sitting back in it and, you know, pounding coffee or something and trying to figure that out like that. But yeah, it's kind of my don't think about it approach sometimes, because you know you may have not done the right thing for you, but to really labor on that and be in that mindset is no help.
What do you think is the most enjoyable part? And I go back and forth on this in terms of, is it, and why people cave? Is it the actual reward? You know, like an extra large, you know, concrete at Andy's, or a big giant piece of chocolate cake, or 7 trunk cookies, or, you know, a night out at your favorite Mexican joint with endless chips and salsa and margaritas and all kinds of things. Is the reward the real enticing piece, or is it the relief from being disciplined?
In some ways, I think it, you know, coming from, you know, kind of an addictive nature family and knowing a lot of people that are addicted, sometimes I think it's just like chasing a little bit of a high, man. And kind of, you know, feeling like it's, you know, we're a little bit invincible and going for it. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
You know, I think, because I go through that all the time, and I talk with athletes about that, you know, and because you see it a lot with athletes that are, you know, super consistent. And again, I think overly rigid, because I think, like, I love the 80-20 approach to life, right? Not from a polarized standpoint, but from like I try to be pretty consistent all the time, you know, with eating right or and exercising, but 20% of the time, like, you know, I also want to have some fun. Right. I want to do, you know, whatever I want to, right. And live. And I think that balance is the hardest, because it's not balanced. Right. And I think, you know, a lot of people love to be strict. And again, you see this in training, where athletes are so consistent for a long period of time that at some point they just break, you know, and then they'll break a day and they're like, oh, my streak's broken. I just wanted to rebel today. And there was no reason for me to not do this. I just didn't want to do it, not to do it. To me, that's a surefire sign of you felt like you had to be so perfectly disciplined for so long that now it broke. And guess what? That one missed session leads to a lot more missed sessions, because they broke their quote unquote streak, and they feel like, you know, it's all about perfection. It's not about progress over perfection, which we always, you know, really try to instill to our athletes. So they get to that point, and the same way it's the same way in dieting, right? People go way off the reservation and remove all these things, and they drop 6 pounds in 2 weeks, but it's not sustainable. So what happens? They put on 8, because when they get back on it, they go ballistic, right? They go full all in, right? It's very similar to, you know, addicts and alcoholics. You know, one of my favorite phrases I heard in my first few months of sobriety was, you know, every time you're inside of a meeting, your disease is outside doing a push-up, right? It's getting stronger, right? It's not just because you're not drinking doesn't mean you don't have the disease. It's getting actually more powerful as you, once you have it, you have it. And that's why when so many people, you know, when they relapse, it's horrific, right? They hospitalize, overdose, and, you know, and pass away. It's the same way when you're just overly rigid with everything. It also takes the fun out of it. Like I just got done reading this book called Die with Nothing. And it's a total like flip of the script on how you should save for retirement. And most people are taught like, from the, 70s, 80s, like you work as long as you can and you save as much as you can, and that's it. Right. And this is the total opposite. It basically says, yes, you want to save and be strategic and, have a certain amount to live off of, but life is about experiences. It's about living life to its fullest. It's about doing and spending money on these experiences in the time of your life that makes the most sense when you're actually healthy enough to do them, right? Versus most people save as much money as they possibly can until they retire at 65 or 70, and then they're too old and unhealthy and not physically able to do all the fun things they wanted to do, right? Or they want to give all this money to their kids when they pass away, instead of spending it on their kids and doing nice things for them while they're actually alive and they can see it. So it flies against like conventional wisdom on like, how to save, how much to save, when to spend, like in the peak period of your life. So again, to me, I mentioned that book because it's very much like you have people who are so frugal that never spend and always save, and they'll work till they're 60 to 65. Then they have to have more money to save more. And then they're 70. By the time they're done, like they can't even do anything they want to do because they're too old. Right. And they've lost all time. And so there's a good happy medium, right? Just like there is in training, just like there is with fueling. And I think you brought up that great point, which I know I struggle with, is like trying not to be so hard on yourself when you do fall short one day, when you do, maybe go out for, overdo it on a meal, or you miss a session, right? Or you spend money on something, you weren't sure about. Like I think that like guilt and that shame and that disappointment we inflict on ourselves is one of the more damaging things that we can do for ourselves. And that's like once you get into that cycle, it's hard to get out. So I love what you said about just being able to forgive yourself. And I know it sounds like a strong, powerful, maybe religious-based word for some people, but it's true, right? You don't have to penalize yourself and go run extra miles or burn more calories, right? Like it's okay to live a little, right? In all areas, it's okay to skip some workouts. It's about what makes it fun and what it allows you to do it sustainably for the longest period of time. And that's what allows you to be healthy. It's not the yo-yoing back and forth, right? And because that really gets you nowhere.
Yeah, man. I think about that all the time. I feel like we're behind the eight ball in a lot of ways with things that are pushed at us, and the stuff we eat and everything like that. These empty calories, and we're sort of a nation of addicts in a way. I mean, we talked about sugar last time and how all these things keep popping into our lives, and it's just we're just kind of empty, trying to fill a void a lot of times. And I think that that's a really tricky situation for a lot of us, especially training for triathlon, right? because you need a lot of energy, and it's easy to go up and down and the roller coaster, the whole thing. And but that's why, again, when I'm right, like last night, here it is. It's sort of this comfort food thing. And last night just happened to be a pizza order. I had food ready to cook, but I'm like, and I just did an Ironman. I can do a pizza, and which is okay. But when I'm doing it right, I'm actually eating it and chewing it and taking my time, cause I'll easily plow through a medium pizza, just gone. Or sometimes when I can slow that down and maybe only eat half of it. And then I'm like, I feel it's sort of a win if that happens. I'm like, all right, I didn't go ballistic and then open that box the next morning and be like, damn, that thing is gone. It's just like I kind of in the moment contained myself or something, or at least had a conscious approach to eating the junk that went in, you know, not that pizza's junk, because I love it, but you know what I mean? So I just think there's sort of this endless cycle that has been created that's very tough to avoid sometimes. You know, everyone, you know, if you can't be social unless you're going out to eat custard or whatever. So it's tricky, man. But I do think that, you know, we just got to kind of roll through it a little bit. You know, we're all vulnerable in that regard. I think nobody's perfect, and that sort of pursuit of perfection is tricky. It puts a lot of pressure on you, you know, and I think that translates into racing, you know. Sometimes you just got to accept what you got and understand that that's you know, this is a process and it isn't all about the race or whatever. And just getting the job done is good. It's hard for, I think, a lot of people that, you know, me included, that maybe don't have the race that they would have liked to actually accept it. And then it's sort of like, you know, there's two things you can do after that. You can either be like, well, this shit ain't for me, or you go 100% the other way and balls in on it. And, you know, whereas there's so many different options, I think, if you just sort of think about it and decide what feels good and what makes you happier, and, you know, doesn't deplete your resources all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like it's really, really hard, I think, because, you know, you've got such polarizing ends of the spectrum, and I think most people adopt you know, they overextend themselves in their expectations and what they believe it takes to be, you know, consistent, right? And what's expected of them. And athletes, you know, you see this all the time, just like I do. Is like athletes are are often, like always, way more harder on themselves than we are on them, right? You know, from just a missed session, you know, it's one. But I think the piece that we all have to probably, again, not all, but a lot of us could do better on, and maybe try to find a way is, you know, just like we as coaches look in Training Peaks and you see an athlete on Monday or Tuesday, you know, they do a few workouts and, you know, they go okay, but they're talking about being tired, right? Well, you know, you got kind of two schools of thought here. One is, okay, we change up Wednesday and make it super easy, or put in a day off, right? Or you're like, oh, we're just gonna push through because we got to keep moving, and then they keep pushing, and they maybe make it one more day, maybe make it 2, max 3, and then they're done. They are mentally and physically roasted. They're overtrained. They're super fatigued. They're not sleeping. Now you got to take off for a week or two, right? And so I think the closer we get to that, the end of our bandwidth on, again, our physical bandwidth, our stress bandwidth, that if we don't allow ourselves, and you see this too, is like especially with Ironman training and the ones that do the early season race and the late season races, they're in such good shape. It's not really about managing how they're doing physically. It's about managing their attention and their motivation. And so you can oftentimes read through like a person's usual, comments and Training Peaks. And if they're usually, 4 to 5 sentences and they go back to like 1 or 2 orders, and they go from being super positive all the time and very descriptive to like overly negative, then it's time for a break. Something's not right. Something's not adding up. Right. And so you got to give them these periods of time off, but it's better to have 1 or 2 days down or even off than it is to reach like that critical point that again is damaging, not just physically, but also psychologically. Because it just like diet and exercise, if you're so strict and you expect perfection, and anything short of perfection is a failure, then the more times you go after perfection and fall short, the more likely you are to feel like a total failure. Same with training. If you expect perfection, you expect a certain number of hours a week, and you expect a certain time, the more times you restart, which athletes and people trying to get their weight and their diet under control are famous for restarting, right? Every single time you go back to restart, the expectation, the pressure is even higher, because the fear of failure grows with each time, because you're expecting perfection and you have no track record of perfection, right? None of us do. None of us are perfect. We've never done anything perfect, but we have that pressure. And then so when you fall short again, you keep reiterating and reinforcing this belief system within yourself that you are a failure and you are actually in fact incapable of accomplishing this goal, whether it's finishing your first triathlon, going faster in your Ironman, dropping 10 pounds, eating more healthy, whatever it is. You set yourself up for failure, not that it's not possible, but that you give yourself an impossible goal, schedule, removal of things in your diet. I mean, we go and we wonder why we keep getting back here. And to me, it's almost setting yourself up for imperfection is honestly the closest we can get to perfection, right? It's like kind of how we joke with athletes about, power meters is like all power meters are different. They're all inconsistent, but as long as they're consistently inconsistent, that's all that matters. And that's honestly like how you have to look at tough life challenges that we put on ourselves, like training for a race or trying to eat better, is that, being, 100%, if 100% of the time you're always 80% there, then you're going to be way, way further ahead than the person's that always goes in 100% and only gets 50% of the way there. Halfway every time. Like if you can commit to being and understand that you're going to be imperfect each week, and you got 7 days a week. Let's say you even do 5 days out of the week. You're still working out more than you're not. You're still 5 days out of 7. That's good. And say, I'm going to commit to that for a year. So much easier to commit to than when you see someone, I'm going to make this whole month perfect. Like the bandwidth and the brain power and the willpower that goes into that, it deteriorates over time and then makes you less likely to do it the next. I've had 4 people in the past 6 years that have done this 100-day challenge. They all did it, and they all quit running for months afterwards.
The run challenge?
The run 100 days in a row.
Sounds
quit
miserable.
Running completely for months because you need to run every day. 6 days a week you can pull off. Even that's a stretch for a lot of people. But it's the every day. It's the certain mileage, 2 or 3 miles every day. Got to for 100 days. And then what happens is not physically are they so beat up, but mentally, once they hit that goal, it's not about what the goal was for the year or the goal to get better. It's just this small little benchmark. And then they're like, oh, I've already, because if you think about the perfection and the willpower and motivation and discipline it takes to do 100 days in a row, that might be for you all you have in you for the whole year. We talk a lot about burning matches physically, but there's also burning matches with discipline and motivation and commitment, and we always, try to talk carefully and cautiously with athletes. Like, listen, like your race schedule is very aggressive, and just know that, physically you can, it's still not ideal, but the biggest thing is the discipline to schedule an irresponsible race calendar, but also to expect great things out of it, not just physically, but also just mentally, like to expect that you're going to be mentally engaged all year is unfair. It's unfair to you because the likelihood of it happening is not very high.
I love that, man. When you said that, it's tough to commit for that long. I mean, it's mentally draining. I think that's what it was. I mean, this year I just was into this run walk thing and I loved it. But the thought of going out and running every day was just like, but I went out and I was just really into it, and, I may not be for everybody as a coach. I get that, but I'm so much into this idea of simplicity and let's figure out what's making you happy and what you're enjoying. And like this getting lost in the weeds for, like most of us, can be a little dicey, man, because it does chip away, I think, at that commitment and your consistency, like you said. And it's very difficult to be on point day after day. I love getting on the phone with athletes before a race and just looking at what we did and and how to make it work with what we got, and because that's really what it boils down to is like, I wish I'd have been more consistent all year, but it was just sort of one of those things. And I think that ultimately that is sort of my end game, is just to keep consistency at whatever that looks like. Like you said, it might be 2 days off a week, or it might be, walking 2 days when instead of like, hitting a hard interval or whatever, but all year, every day, every week, just kind of figuring out that sweet spot and being consistent with that, and then showing up at the race and just, letting it rip a little bit. Because I was talking about that. I mean, it's just, I was talking to somebody about my race, and I went into this thing. I just think that there's certain motivators, right? Like we talk a lot about having an A, B, and a C goal within a race, right? And I'm all in favor of that. And I think, this year I went in, with the idea of really holding back and being conservative. And I think it just chipped away at my desire as the day went on, because, sometimes you get off that bike, and if you don't have your possibility available, it really can kind of turn you inward. And I feel like that's what happened in a lot of ways, maybe even the last couple of years, whatever. But it's just interesting to me, you get out of the water, maybe you're a little bit behind your goal or schedule, and then you get on that bike, and then you just watch that day, that A day just chip away. And a lot of times I just, I get to a race like that, and you got to kind of dig in there. And I think that's what we forget, is like, that is going to be hard. But if it's going to be super hard and you really don't have what you're looking for waiting for you, it gets even harder. You know what I mean? So I think we need to save the ability to go get that. And that's kind of what I always look for, is sort of like, we're racing, right? So it's not going to be easy, and you got to push yourself. And if you don't have that mentally, it's all a microcosm of training and everything like that. You want to get up every day and give exactly, or, what you can give to that day. And I think it boils into racing too. It's sort of like, a lot of times you find out the best races come because somebody was able to go mentally way deeper than they thought.
And I mean, I think what you alluded to there is an approach I think that we could all take into next year, right? Is that because I think the pressure we put on ourselves, right, with its maybe we have to come back and do better from this last year, right? Or the last race was things have to go better this year. So we immediately from the out into the season start to put this extra pressure on ourselves for a race 8 months from now. So the pressure just builds from the very first workout, because now we have to meet this pressure-packed season that all culminates in a day 9 months down the road.
Yeah, that's tricky, man.
And I think so. I think like adding in races, like you talked before we went live day about one of your athletes who PR'd at Michigan, and how they had like the less than ideal lead up 3 weeks in, and the goal was just to just go for it, just send it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the freedom in that is priceless. And so I think I think for athletes, people get disciplined and rigid, confused. And I think most athletes get themselves into trouble by being overly rigid and not precisely disciplined. And what I mean by that is they expect to be rigid all year. Well, eventually they break, right? Like you want to have precision with when I need to actually put the most amount of discipline in for the longest period of time. And that time ain't January. Unless your A race is in like March, and ain't the time. Right. So sprinkling in and I think and you probably get this too. Sometimes I get comments from athletes they're like, I just don't think you're taking this as seriously as me. And I'm like, you're right. I'm not. And I'm trying to get you to not take it as seriously either, because the fact that we're having this conversation means you're taking it too seriously. And I think, again, there's this, I was listening to a podcast earlier with probably the world's best triathlon coach, period, on the planet, Dan Lorang. And he talked about high performance. And the first thing he said was, you have to love what you do.
Yeah.
He didn't say you have to be disciplined, overcommitted, greatest athlete ever, never miss such as. You have to love what you do. Like that is the truth for athletes. But they get so serious, so overcomplicated, so searching for perfection that they rob themselves of the fun of it. And so when you have this conversation with athletes, like, hey, you just need to calm down. Like you need to relax. Like this is totally fine. We're in a great spot and have some fun. This is supposed to be fun, right? What you're doing is supposed to be fun. And if you're not having fun, then we're doing it wrong. And so when you look at your race calendar, as many people are planning next year, or maybe adding in a few races later in this year, like I encourage you to find ones to pick. And this might sound really weird coming from a coach, but pick a race that you just don't give a shit about. Find a 5K or a trail half marathon or a sprint or an Olympic, and just go out there with no pressure, no expectation, and just go after it and just send it and see what happens. Right? The training that happens going into that, I guarantee will be so much more fun than the rigidity of your last 8 to 10 week block of your biggest race of the year that you now expect to hold for the whole next year, from January 1st to December 31st. Pick races that, because I see this every year. It's getting more and more common each and every year is like an athlete to have like 3 A races for the year. I'm like, that ain't happening. Even 2, unless it's in like March and September, it ain't happening. I'm sorry. It's just not. Like you can peak for really 1 day, max 2 the whole year, especially for an age group athlete. But again, because you're not a professional and you have other life stressors and things that change up your life, like your bandwidth to focus on your goal is so much shorter than the life of like a professional elite athlete. Like you've got other things to do, other stressors, other responsibilities, other conflicting things that come up in your life. So to expect to be rigid and perfect, all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure. So pick races where like, yeah, I got this on my calendar, but I'm gonna train as good as I can and just have some fun this day and see what happens. Love it. But most athletes, again, like they think they get, again, so caught up in well, I've got to have the perfect periodized plan, and the annual training plan and Training Peaks says this, and I've got to go buy a plan off Training Peaks that tells me to do this and on this specific day. And I'm like, well, that's just not real life. It's just not. It's not real life. Like it's your life. And 1, it needs to be fun, and 2, it needs to fit how it's supposed to fit. And so when you look at, again, late season, I had a guy jokingly text me yesterday. He's like, hey, I signed up for a half marathon in like 5 weeks. I was like, of course you did. He goes, well, let's be honest, you were going to give me an hour and a half run anyway. And I was like, all right, that's fair. All right. It's like, very true. Go out and rip it, see what happens. It's like we look for only, I think, serious milestones. And when you look at, I know we mentioned this a lot, when you go back to things like run camp that we put on, where we're in very hard, very challenging terrain, when all you're worried about is having fun and getting it done. A lot of people totally go above and beyond what they ever thought possible, because really it's just all they're focused on is the effort, the experience, and the finish line. Not every specific minute by minute, second by second detail that starts from beginning to end. Again, like the perfect example is like the Ironman Wisconsin debrief we did about how we talked about how the course requires such attention from such an early start time, right? You compare the Ironman Wisconsin swim to like an Ironman California swim, which totally downstream. You barely have the sight, right? There's no second loop. You're not even going to be engaged for like 45 minutes afterwards. Right. So you look at again, like the Ironman Wisconsin race and that breakdown we did is very similar to having multiple races at every time of the year where you've got to stay focused with it. Like at some point you just get beat down from the chin up. Right. Fitness wise, you probably still got it. Maybe even the fittest you've ever been. But if you don't have it mentally, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter. If you've lost the will to get up and go to the start line, it's gone. Like I told told an athlete a few weeks ago, I said, I think you've, I said, I think you're afraid to dig deep again. Great fitness, long year. I said, I think you just don't want to dig deeper anymore because you've dug deep all year because you've over raced. So it's no wonder you aren't excited. I wouldn't be excited too to go touch a hot stove. Been there, done that. It's not recommended, but we'll be there doing it again, right? Trying to race again. And so I think again, when you're looking at the end of your season or plan things, is to insert things that are fun. You know, century ride, a trail race, a 5K, a gravel ride, a Spartan, whatever. Who the fuck cares? Whatever. Something that detaches you completely from what you have to be the most disciplined with. And so plotting those in, just like, you know, maybe scheduling a day where you can, you know, for one meal, eat the way you want to. And no matter what, that's got to be the day. Some meal on a Saturday is going to be your cheat meal. It becomes more of a, you know, oh, well, it's part of my day, you know, but maybe I'm not feeling it today. Maybe I want to keep eating it. So I think if we add these pieces and these opportunities to be flexible in, I think you might find yourself being more disciplined. And I think that was some of this conversation with a parent at Hayden's baseball game last week about this study in the Harvard Business Review said there were these 4 companies that gave their employees unlimited PTO. And what happened is at all these companies, their employees took less PTO than ever before. And so I think that's a very applicable approach to training, is when you understand and are open to and encourage flexibility and listening to your body and you know, that you don't have to be perfect, that it actually probably leads to when they get in these great groups, like, hey, I see the off day, I just don't really want to take it. Like, can I do like an easy swim or a run? Instead of like, I can't wait for a day, if I can't wait to rebel, it becomes part of it. So again, I think there's a really happy medium in that happy medium.
Yeah. I mean, really quickly going back to my conversation with that athlete that you mentioned, Tom, he was in Europe a couple weeks before the race, did a lot of hiking and running and everything. And we were, you know, he wasn't in an ideal training situation for the 70.3, but we talked, and, you know, so I'm kind of like trying to, well, power this and do this. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, back to this simplicity thing. I said, all right, here's the deal. Let's just warm up good before that swim strong, and then don't even look at your power for the first 30 miles. Just go get it. Because, I mean, realistically, just get off that bike as soon as you can. And then he's a good runner, right? And he got off and he just like hammered it. So, you know, we got done with that conversation and he goes, all right, that's the mantra. F it. Today we ball. And it worked. I mean, it's just, I think it was the freedom. You know, I watched Wisconsin play this weekend. Our starting quarterback got hurt on the first drive, and then the backup guy came in, and by all accounts, he's like knows every inch of the playbook. He's very astute with football knowledge and all this kind of stuff. He looked like a damn robot out there. I mean, you could just see him thinking. You know, we talk about people you can see thinking and swim. That's exactly what it looked like. Then you watch the Alabama quarterback. He looked like he was out there playing sand football, just running around, throwing shit everywhere, and just having a great time. And it was night and day. And I think that time, you know, for me, that's what a lot of this boils down to sometimes, is just being free. You know, you talk about it all the time, race free. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, figure it out on your own. But to me, and I know that's what I did this year, I raced mechanically, man. You know, my thing, I love going up hills a little bit hard, you know, but to this time I was going up a little bit more under control. And frankly, I felt like it was harder, you know, because for whatever reason, I kind of cranked the gears up in my brain about, all right, stay. And, you know, it's like sometimes running faster can feel easier. And I feel like that's the same thing on the bike. You know, it's almost like you give away the momentum. And when you lose momentum, when you're trying to move forward fast, it makes it harder. So I just think that shit's interesting, man. Just let it rip and get done a little sooner. It's like, you say, you know, if I'd have say 45 minutes on the bike, for example, that's a long time. You know, whether or not you're kind of going more your speed or whatever, I don't know. If you feel it, just get it. I don't know.
I don't
If you see
disagree.
the opening, go for it, man.
I think
It's like juking around in the backfield instead of hitting the hole, you know? It's never going to.
right. I mean, I think most all athletes will never find their true like peak in performance because they're too restrained with the way that they train and the way that they race. We are it's always funny, I think, listening to sports scientists and especially the ones that are all data, like, no, all content, no context, is they'll go through all of this planning and analyzing, and at the end of all of it, they still say, but even then, we still can't predict. We still don't know. And I'm like, well, then why do we spend? Because data and analyzing has its place, but like the human body is capable of so much that it's unpredictable. Like, to me, the human body is just like the ocean. Like, trying to even like wrap your brain around what's actually in the ocean and how deep and vast it is. It's like I can't even wrap my brain around it. Like the small amount of the ocean we've actually explored versus what's actually really out there. No idea. The human body is the same way, but we try to work within this rigid scale of, well, it's got to be this specific pace and this specific heart rate. I'm like, you know your body better than anything. Like, go out and feel it. And if you can rip it, rip it. But if you can't, don't. Because then you're also going to dig yourself a hole, right? Because the point in every session of every race is to get the most out of your body that session in that day, in that race, on that moment. And a lot of times, like, you're so restrained both ways, right? You could go faster, but you don't. Or you need to go slower, but you don't. Right? I'm sure this was true at Ironman Wisconsin for a lot of athletes that were walking the run. They wanted to chase a certain miles per hour on the bike, but the wind crushed them, but they couldn't help themselves. They couldn't help themselves. Right? Or, it's we kind of had this conversation, it's incredibly briefly at Wisconsin, and I had this with some athletes too. As I said, the one that went to did well at Michigan this last weekend. I said, really? I said, with where we are with your run, it's not like we're getting faster. So what's another 20 watts on the bike? I said, just go out and light it up.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to affect your run. Just light it up. And if it does, it does. But I'm pretty sure it won't. And it didn't. And so but you can't figure out those things unless you just ball out, right? Unless you just go out and decide to rip it and have fun. Because that's so fun too, right? Is finding the limit. And then the point is to find a new limit after that, not to just like make that limit the limit, but then to be committed to saying, well, now what can I do? And it's just really fun to work with athletes, and then for them to kind of be like, oh shit, it's like you're opening up a whole new world. Because like, I didn't think I could do this. I didn't think I could swim this fast. I didn't think I could have bike power like this. I don't think I could run this far. And you're opening up it's like a whole new endurance world, because they've just always thought themselves and trained themselves into a box, versus understanding that the human body is so unpredictable and so incredible that it can do insane things, and that just like the top feats in the world, right? It was thought that no one could break the 4-minute mile, no one ever. And then someone broke it. And then within the next year, 20 plus people broke it.
Yeah.
I mean, do you need anything else? Right? It's like, that's just proof that like we restrain and restrict our ability more than anything else. You can blame it on lifestyle and food and stressors and training or whatever, but we limit ourselves mostly, or like, I don't have the ability, or you're just an athlete, or I'm not like that. I'm like, no, you're not, because you don't think like that. Like, the chin up is where you're defined. You confirm what you are or you aren't. It's the chin up, right? You think like a loser, you're going to be one. You think like a winner, you're going to be one. It's that simple. But we restrict and restrain ourselves so much with our mind and staring at a device in front of it 24/7 that we miss so much of an opportunity to really like figure out where are my limits? Because the chance of you guessing what your limit is basically zero. Zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we try.
Yeah, we do. I like that. It's like break through your own Roger Bannister wall.
Mm.
You know? I like that, man. Go out and see what you got. I mean, break through it mentally. Just, there's no doubt probably most people listening to this have a lot more in them.
100%. I mean,
you just got to believe it. You got to see it and believe it. I think
brain.
that's it. You got to try it to believe it and see it.
Yeah, and you give it a shot.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it's like, then that was like some people still train, this way, is they look at, they break down, on a sheet, like what it takes to, let's use an example, like what it takes to win the Ironman World Championships. You have to swim this speed, and then you have to have this watts per kilogram on the bike that equates to this watt and this weight. And then the run, you have to hold this for this. You have to have this economy. And they legit just work backwards. So if I know I've got to hold 280 watts, right? They hold higher than that, but say I've got to hold 280 watts for 5 hours. But for them, it's like four, a little under. Then some still do this. They start training at 280 watts and see how long they hold it for. Take a rest, hold it again. They do race demand training. That's it. And so I think it's an interesting discussion to have with athletes, and just I think us as we have this conversation with ourselves, is because even then, like even honestly, our biggest, wildest dream of performance is probably still short of what we can do. Because it's honestly my least favorite comment from an athlete. I'm just not an athlete. You're right. You're not. You think like a sedentary, lazy person. So of course you're not going to be an athlete. Well, I wasn't born with the same things. I'm like, that's one of my least favorite one too. Yes, we all have different genetics, but at the same time, like we've all seen transformations and people come from nothing, right? Or come from like a very different background and accomplish amazing things. We just want to look for the ones that didn't happen, right? But you are who you think you are, for better or for worse. And you can do what you think you can do, for better or for worse. And if you think you're going to succeed, you're going to succeed. If you think you're going to fail, you're probably going to fail. And if you're going to have fun, you're going to go out and look to have fun. Right? If you want to look for something to critique, guess what? You're going to find it.
Yep.
Right? It's like you're always, if you're looking for something shitty to happen that day, something is going to happen. Right? But if you have like a great outlook and you're in a great mood, even a large thing that happens that's not fun isn't even going to faze you. So it's prevalent in every aspect of your life. It's the way that you think. We just like to blame everything else. And so I think when you look at training, when you look at racing, when you look at planning your year, and look at your approach, remember all that, that we're oftentimes, constricted and restrained, and we do that to ourselves. Right. We just pretend that it's elsewhere.
No doubt.
No doubt. You can leave it there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna head to Andy's, get concrete. No, I'm kidding. I'm good.
Don't beat yourself up, man. Go do it. Yeah. Just eat half.
No, I'm not gonna do that.
I might.
Yeah, listen.
I don't have any.
Still, Culver's is best. Culver's is the best custard.
That's a good thing about living up here, man. Is that shit isn't that accessible to me. Have to really put some effort in,
like,
man.
You got it. I mean, it's freaking ride our bike up to Freddy's or Andy's, like freaking Cookie Co. Like,
I got to drive to Milwaukee for Leon's. That's like 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, Sunday morning we got up and rode our bikes from the house up to the grocery store, the Starbucks, and so I got myself a coffee, and Hayden got a cinnamon roll. I mean, there's It's everywhere. But that was a good experience. I had fun doing that. So
I could tell you're a little bit like, damn it.
I was like, dang it. I was like, enjoy that cinnamon roll, buddy. He's like, why aren't you having one? And I said, well, it's because daddy lacks self-control right now. I didn't say that, but I was like, I'm just not going to have one. Not going to have one, but I'll have one. As always, love you guys. Appreciate you. Thanks for listening today. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for coaching for the rest of this year, I wanted to have a more fun, happier, healthier, higher performing experience next year. Click on the coach tab and find the coach that is right for you. As always, if you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me specifically, I'm at Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. Good stuff.
All right, dude. Yeah, man. I'll see you Thursday.
Sounds good. See ya.
Okay, dude.